G'day everyone. I have two super leggy Monstera Adansonii here and I want to do something about them. I've had them trailing, but I'd like to get them to climb up. Monstera Adansonii, like many other houseplants, are epiphytic, meaning that they will use other plants as structures upon which to grow. They're not parasitic, they don't leach nutrition from those, but they will use roots to anchor themselves in so that they can climb up, reach more sunlight. And they like to climb, but I haven't got anything for them to climb on. So today, we are going to be making some self-watering moss poles that these plants will be able to grow up. Let's get building, shall we? This is what we're going to be working on today. I'm going to make another one that is this size, but you can adjust them fairly easily. I'm going to need a few things to do this today. First, I'm going to need the spine of the self-watering moss pole. This is a length of PVC piping. This is a really thin one. This is a 15mm version. You can go wider if you need to with much larger ones, but this will be absolutely fine for what I need. It's very inflexible, so it's quite rigid, it's quite strong, and it will do the job of holding the moss pole up. You can get lengths longer than this. You can also cut them shorter quite easily if you use a hacksaw or another saw like this. It's quite easy to trim them down to size, but I am going to keep it this fairly long length. I'm also going to need an end cap for the PVC pipe that is the same size as the PVC pipe, so we'll use that in a moment. I'm also going to need something to wrap around it. I'm just using this garden mesh. It's black, it's plastic, and it will hold the sphagnum moss in, which I will use in a moment. I'm using sphagnum moss for the moss itself. I've also got just off here, I've got a bucket of water or a pot of water because I want to soak the sphagnum before I put it in the moss pole. I'm going to use some cotton macrame cord. This is going to act as a wick to help it to self-water, and to finish it all off, we'll use some zip ties, cable ties to hold it all together. I'm also going to need to make sure that I've got some scissors, and I'm also, this is an optional extra, to keep the bottom of the pole a little heavier, I'm going to be putting just some really fine gravel down there to help weigh it down a little bit, to lower the center of gravity a bit, to reduce the risk of it toppling over, which I don't want to do. Let's get assembling. First, I'm going to put the end cap onto the end of the pole there and make sure it's on nice and tightly. There we go. The amount of the mesh that you cut off will make it a bigger or smaller moss pole. I am kind of going to give it, it's a little bit more than one of my hands, but this isn't an exact science. You can go a little larger if you want it to be a bit thicker, or slimmer if you want it to be smaller. Stuff is very, very cheap, so it's easy to experiment with that. I'm going to find a line to cut along, and I'm going to cut along fairly close to the horizontal or vertical, depending on which direction you're looking at it. And I'm going to cut in a straight line there. Okay, next I'm also going to take off the other ends from the one that I did previously. See how there's those kind of extra little sections there. They're a real pain to work with later on, so I'm going to chop them off as well. I didn't notice I'm currently in my carport. I'm doing this in a space that is easy to sweep because I'm going to make a bit of a mess here. I'll toss them to the side for later. I'll clean them up when I'm finished. And that is going to be the outside, the cage that keeps our sphagnum in. So now I need to prepare my sphagnum moss. I'm going to get the moss, I'm going to get my water, and I'm going to take handfuls at a time. I want to be fairly liberal with this. I want to use a fair amount. All right, I might need to add some more sphagnum to this later. We'll just see how we go. I want to have a layer that is about 2 or 3 or 4 centimeters thick, going across pretty well the whole thing, maybe leaving a little bit of space at the edges. It doesn't need to go all the way to the edge, but certainly all the way down the middle. We need a layer that is 3 or 4 centimeters thick. You can go a little thicker if you want, but we need it to be at least that thick. We don't want to see the spine in the middle, and we want it to have enough space where the plants can put their roots into it as well. So I'm going to take big handfuls of this, squeeze it out, so I don't want to put puddles of water everywhere, and start spreading it out. needs to be fairly dense. So just like that. Now I'm pretty happy with the coverage that I'm getting there. It's pretty even. I've got a little bit of a gap towards the edges. Now before I place the pole in the middle, I'm first going to put the cord down the hole there. So I'm going to take some cord. I'll cut it later, once I know how long I need. I'll put a knot, just any knot. Doesn't even need to be a full grinding or reef knot, just like tie it through once so you've got a little bit of mass at the end. Like that there. And I'm going to thread it down the pole. Now I can't see where it is, but I should be able to feel when it gets to the bottom because it will stop accepting more as easy. I'm going to get the first zip tie and I'm going to actually tie it there so that it's nice and stable. And then I'm going to wind the cord around until we get down very close to the bottom, at least where it's going to, the moss pole itself will stop. I've gone with zip ties that are fairly short, which makes this job a little trickier than I'd like, but it's still doable. So, you know, if you find zip tying tricky, go with slightly longer lengths. There we go. So I've got the zip tie tying the cord to the top there. I will trim off the little plastic bit at the end, and now I'm going to wind the rest of the cord around. Doesn't need to be too close, but it needs to be reasonably close because this is going to act as the wick that will water the sphagnum moss. Okay, that's about as far down as I need to go. I'm going to chop it just with some scissors. And I'm going to use another zip tie and I'm going to latch it on, tie it on just there. Okay, I am now able to chop off the extra plastic bits because we're going to now put this into the middle of our bed of moss as it currently is before we turn it into a moss pole. So I'm going to have the end with the cap, the bit that extends out beyond the moss because that's going to go at the base of our pot and the open end will go at the top. I'll move the water out of the way so you can see it there. So that's going to go up here, that's the open end. I'm now going to close them up. There's no real exact science to this. I'm just going to kind of fold one over and roll it, and I'm going to make sure it's all lined up fairly nicely, and then I will begin zip tying every 4 or 5 of these kind of squares. If you're using a finer mesh, probably do a little less frequently. And I will always make sure that I've got one right at the end. I don't want to have the end being open at all. I don't want it to start opening up, so we'll put one right at the end. And then I'm also going to put one running along the horizontal or the opposite direction, or the perpendicular direction, so that it doesn't slide up and down too much. And I'll do that also in the middle and at the other end as well. And that'll be plenty of cable ties, zip ties securing our moss pole. I'm just about finished now, but as you can see, I've got these lovely bits of plastic, a little hard to see against the grey of the floor, but I've got these zip ties just hanging off, so I'm just going to chop them off. And again, I've chosen a spot in my house where I can just throw them on the floor and sweep them up later to make it nice and easy, so I'm going to do that now. And we are pretty well there now. All that's left really is to put it in the pot, but I am first going to add some gravel into the hole up the top here, just to add a bit more weight to the base here so that it's not as top heavy, but that is totally an optional extra. I should also probably use a funnel because this is quite fiddly, but I don't have one on me at the moment, so I'm just going to kind of throw in a few at a time. I'll do the rest off camera. Okay, so I've got my moss pole here and I've got the pot. in which I'm going to put these plants. It's probably a little bigger than ideal. It's quite a lot larger than the 2 pots, but there are 2 plants and we are going into spring and summer in Australia here at the moment. So I don't think we're gonna have too much of a problem with this soil drying out. I really don't want to size up too quickly because of the risk of root rot, but because we're going into warmer weather and my soil mix, which there's a link in the description below to my mix that I use, is very well draining. So I think that will be okay. I'm just using a black nursery pot. I may put this in a decorative pot at some point, but it doesn't matter for today. We are going to pot this up. So I'm gonna put my gloves on and we're going to get to it. So first thing is, I'm going to place the moss pole into the pot. It's gonna go all the way down to the bottom. I am going to put it about in the center for this one here because I can put a plant on either side. I'm gonna have 2 plants growing in this pot to start with. I may even take some more propagations and end up placing them around it to have a really thick base. That's not gonna be a problem. Now I'm going to start backfilling. I'm just gonna use my hands because I wasn't prepared and I didn't bring any other tools, so that's okay. I've just got my big tub of soil off screen to the side here. Okay, so the moss pole itself is starting to get a bit buried now, and that's not actually a problem. The sphagnum moss isn't going to have a problem with that. To make sure that we're nice and sturdy, I'm going to do a little bit of compacting around the base of the pole, though as you can see it's starting to hold quite nicely, which means it's time to add my plants, I think. So I'm going to start with this one. It's going to be super lanky to start with, but we'll finish it off with some Velcro in just a moment, and I'll take it out of its pot there. It's going to be super root bound. Yeah, the root system is a whole mess. I've just lost all my soil, so I'm going to just spread it out there, poke it into the soil a bit there, and hope that that's going to be okay. And that's not ideal, but Monstera adansonii are super hardy plants, which is good because I've just torn it really out of its soil. What can you do? Be more careful is what you can do. Not going to be a problem though, I don't think. And then on the other side, we'll put this one. Oh gosh, this one doesn't have a great root system either. I don't even really know how it's, we're not missing, that's its entire root system. Huh, I'm not missing any. I haven't lost a ton here. Well, we'll place it in there. And now we will backfill it. Okay, I've really now just got a super lanky trailing pot with a big moss pole in the middle, so let's instead make it a climbing pot with the moss pole in the middle. I'm going to use Velcro tape for this, and I'm going to take the plants up the pole. I'm going to do my best to see if there are any aerial roots and place the aerial root, that's the back of the vine, against the moss so that it will encourage it to grow into the moss. It's not going to go on the leaf side because that's got a leaf on it. We want it to put the aerial roots into the moss pole itself. So that's my goal for this. That's one of them on, let's get the second one. You know, I think I'm going to propagate it instead. There's a lot of section that doesn't have any leaves, and I'm going to chop and prop the end bit. I'll put it, I might even just try placing some straight in the soil and seeing what happens. We'll give it a go, because at the moment it's very leggy and I want to encourage it to push out more growth from along the vine itself. So I'm going to prune it and see what happens. Okay, this section I will put in water in a moment. So now I need to water this plant, and I'm going to put in some water in the top so that we have a reservoir going all the way down, which will be wicked out from the cord. And because the cord's wrapped all the way down, it should, in theory, wick down as well, and that will water the sphagnum moss, which will encourage the Monstera adansonii to put roots into the sphagnum moss, propping it up, encouraging it to grow more. So that's what I need to do now. And that's really all I need to do for the moment. I'm going to continue to water it, and I'm going to continue to make sure that there's water in the moss pole itself. And it's not much to look at the moment, but in a few months' time, I imagine things will be different. So through the magic of editing, you are going to see what it looks like now. All right, it's been not quite a year, about 10 months since I put the Monstera adansonii on the pole. Let's check out what it's done. It's just behind me here. Let's have a look at this thing. It has climbed up the pole. I am really happy with this. There's a couple of things that I would do slightly differently for next time, and I'll tell you about them in a moment, but just take a look at this thing to start with. It is looking a little like it needs a good feed. I've perhaps not been on the fertilizing as much as I should be, but otherwise it has really anchored itself into the pole. It's almost reached the top, and this is looking fantastic. There are a few things that I would do a bit differently though. Let me tell you about them. To start with, when I set this up, I wound the vines around the pole in a coil. I wouldn't do that again in the future. You can see with this top one here, it has got to the end of where I left it, and then its growth has just been straight up. Plants can detect Earth's gravitational pull. The cells in a plant can actually tell which way is down because of Earth's gravity. And generally, plants will want to grow away from that. It's called geotropic movement. And we can see this beautifully here. I am hopeful that long term, eventually when this plant gets to the very top, I'm going to prune it, and then hopefully it's going to activate some of the other nodes from around the coil, but it hasn't done that yet. So at the moment, it's just got the one growth area that's the new spot up here, and that's okay, but it's not kind of as lush around the pole as I would want. So in the future, I would just have more plants maybe, based at the bottom. There are currently actually 3 plants in here. One of the plants that I planted didn't do very well, and it's doing all right. Long term, it's going to fill out the back of it. I've currently got the front of the pole facing you. Ideally, I'd want it going all the way around, like I do on this Micans, which you can expect to see in an upcoming video in the future because I'm very pleased with how it's going. But this has done exactly as I want it to. It's also a little less heavily leaved down the bottom. We're not really sure why. Luna, my cat, likes Monstera adansonii leaves. She doesn't eat them, she just kind of pulls them off, which is very annoying. So the ones that were kind of within her reach for a while have been taken off. It was putting out some big, beautiful leaves towards the bottom, but they have not survived, which is a bit frustrating, but it's gonna continue to grow and fill out. And the ones that are coming towards the top, while being a little underfed, are looking good. You can see as we go around it that the roots have gone in and then have actually come out the other side and then wound those way back into the pole. That's fantastic. These plants are super well anchored onto the pole. If I wanted to take them off, I would have to cut the roots off, and that's no good. So they've done exactly as I wanted them to, and they're properly attached to this pole. A couple of closing remarks on my moss pole. If you are going to keep your moss pole, there are going to be times, I'm sure, where you are not at home for a stretch of a couple of days and the pole is going to dry out. That's not a huge problem, and because I've got the self-watering, it does stay moist for a fair amount of time, but you know, people go on holidays, it happens, and these do dry out from time to time. If you miss a couple of days, it's going to dry out, and that's not a huge problem. If it dries out, the moss becomes a little hydrophobic and it takes a bit of work to get it wet. So by watering the top, sometimes it just runs over the edge and you make a mess. So what I recommend there is that you have a spray bottle that can mist, you give it a good mist, and then you start watering it again with the can. And that seems to work pretty well for this one. I also recommend rotating them every so often, especially if you have got plants growing on both sides of the pole, so that you get a nice even coverage, which mine will eventually get. I have other poles that it has got a nice even coverage, so rotating is a good idea. Finally, just watch your soil moisture levels. It will take a lot of water out of the moss that is under the soil, so just be wary that you don't need to overwater, and you may not need to touch the soil in the pot for a while. You do want to be able to water the soil in the pot. That's where the nutrition is going. You don't want to put nutrition into the pole because that's going to cause problems. Currently, the moss is pretty well sterile. It's just a good place for the roots to anchor into. If we add nutrition in there, that could cause problems. That's what the soil's for. And there we have it. This moss pole was pretty easy to set up. And then with just topping it up the pole with water every day, we have beautifully anchored this climbing plant onto it, and it's doing really well. In the future, I'm going to be pruning it off when it gets to the top. I'm hoping that'll help it to bush out. If it doesn't, I will put more plants actually in the base because I want it to have this beautiful thick coverage throughout the whole thing. It doesn't quite have that now. I was hoping to have a slightly more impressive specimen to show you for this video, but I didn't want to wait another year for that to happen. And it is a patience game. It's not going to grow onto the pole overnight. This is 10 months worth of growing for this plant. It's looking good, but it's going to keep growing. I hope that you feel confident today in making your own moss poles and then caring for them so that you can come out with some really beautiful tall plants yourself. Thanks so much for watching this video. I know it's not avocado related, but I do like to make other plant videos as well on this channel. If you'd like to see more of my stuff, I encourage you to subscribe to Scott Grows an Avocado Tree, where mostly I do avocado related videos, but occasionally we just get other houseplant adjacent videos. It's lots of fun. I'm also on Instagram at Scott Grows an Avocado Tree. And if you just want more of my stuff in general, I have a second channel that's pretty cool where I make videos that inspire in me a sense of curiosity and wonder. I make all kinds of videos over there and I'd really love for you to check it out. Thanks once again for watching. Take care and we'll see you next time.
Scott grows an avocado tree. Scott grows an avocado tree. Scott grows an avocado tree. Scott grows an avocado tree.